Hello and welcome to this channel. Humans have been around for over 200,000 years, but only recently have we begun to understand what life was like for early people. Thanks to archaeological discoveries, scientists are piecing together a picture of how our ancestors lived, hunted, and survived. In this video, we'll take a look at some of the latest findings and learn what it takes to survive in the prehistoric world. The first thing that you need to know about surviving in the prehistoric world is that it was a very different place than the world we live in today. The climate was much warmer, and there were no large animals like elephants or giraffes. Instead, there were giant creatures like the woolly mammoth and the saber-toothed tiger. Humans had to be able to hunt these animals to survive, and they also had to be able to defend themselves against them. Humans are not naturally strong or fast, so they developed tools and weapons to help them survive. They also lived in groups and cooperated in order to hunt and defend themselves. One of the most important things that humans needed to do was find food. Humans could not simply eat plants like modern humans, so they had to hunt animals. This required strength, skill, and courage, but it was worth it because meat provides a lot of calories and nutrients. Humans also needed to find water and shelter. Water is essential for life, and shelter is essential for protection from the elements and from predators. Humans were able to find water by following rivers and streams, and they built shelters out of rocks and wood. One of the biggest challenges that humans faced was staying warm. The prehistoric world was much colder than it is today, and humans had to find ways to keep themselves warm in order to survive. They did this by wearing animal skins and by building fires. Fires were an amazing invention and allowed humans to cook their food, keep themselves warm, and ward off predators. Another challenge that humans faced was finding and gathering plants. Plants were an important source of food for humans, and they also used plants for medicine and for making tools. However, plants can be difficult to find and gather, especially in a world without machines or other modern conveniences. But humans were able to find plants by exploring their environment and by asking other humans who had gathered plants before. They used tools like digging sticks and baskets to gather plants, and they dried and ground up plants to make flour. The last thing that you need to know about surviving in the prehistoric world is that it took a lot of planning and cooperation. Humans could not simply do things on a whim. They had to plan ahead in order to survive. For example, they had to know where the animals were that they wanted to hunt, and they had to know where the plants were that they wanted to gather. They also had to cooperate with other humans in order to do things. For example, it took several humans to build a fire, and it took several humans to hunt a mammoth. In conclusion, surviving in the prehistoric world was not easy, but humans were able to do it by using their intelligence, their creativity, and their adaptability. They were able to develop tools and weapons to help them hunt and defend themselves. They were able to find food and water and shelter, and they were able to stay warm. They were also able to find and gather plants, and they were able to plan ahead and cooperate with others. All of these things helped humans to thrive in the prehistoric world. Now let's take a look at some of the latest archaeological discoveries that are helping us to learn more about how humans survived in the prehistoric world. In recent years, archaeologists have made some incredible discoveries that are helping us to better understand how humans survived in the prehistoric world. One of the most exciting discoveries is the discovery of a new species of human called Homo naledi. Homo naledi is a new species of human that was discovered in South Africa in 2015. It is believed to be about 300,000 years old, and it is thought that it may have lived alongside Homo sapiens in Africa. Naledi is small in stature, about 4 feet tall, but it has a mix of primitive and modern features. Its brain is small like that of an Australopithecine, but it has more modern features like its hands and feet. This discovery has helped scientists to better understand the evolution of humans in Africa, and it has provided insight into the behavior of early humans. Another exciting discovery is the discovery of a new type of stone tool. The new type of stone tool was discovered in Kenya, and it is believed to be about 2.6 million years old. It is a simple tool made from a sharp piece of stone that would have been used for cutting and scraping. This discovery has helped scientists to better understand the behavior of early hominins, the group that includes both humans and their extinct relatives like the Neanderthals and the Hobbit. In addition to these two discoveries, there have been many other discoveries that are helping us to better understand how humans survived in the prehistoric world. For example, in 2019, a team of archaeologists in Spain discovered a site that contained the remains of a meal that had been eaten by a group of humans about 1 million years ago. The meal consisted of roasted vegetables and animal bones, and it provided insight into the diet of early humans. So those are just a few of the latest archaeological discoveries that are helping us to learn more about how humans survived in the prehistoric world. These discoveries are helping us to better understand the behavior of early humans and the challenges they faced. As technology improves, we can expect even more discoveries that will shed light on the lives of our ancestors. We have lots of videos about prehistoric animals and humans, such as this one on the mammoth. Check it out here. And don't forget to subscribe. Most people think that if you gave a human from 2 million years ago a map and compass, they would be able to find their way back to the modern world. This is because many popular films and TV shows like The Flintstones depict early humans as living in caves and hunting and gathering food with no real problems. But this is not the case. Life as an early human was much more difficult than you might think. Humans have always been explorers and adventurers. Even when we didn't know what lay around the next bend, we were willing to go there and find out. But life 2 million years ago was full of challenges. And if you were one of the first humans, you would need to be very prepared before you set out on your travels. Here are 5 things that would surprise you about life 2 million years ago. Before we get started, be sure to hit that like button for more videos. Also, stick around until the end to learn about one of the greatest adventures of all time, the journey of human evolution. Number 1, dangerous terrain. If you were alive 2 million years ago, you would have to deal with some very harsh terrain. Humans have always had to deal with natural disasters, but they are usually rare. For example, most people in the UK have never seen a tornado or an earthquake. In fact, they only see them on the news from other parts of the world. However, 2 million years ago, these events were much more common. Volcanic eruptions were a regular occurrence, and earthquakes shook the ground almost every day. People also had to deal with tsunamis, which could wipe out entire settlements in a matter of minutes. Floods were another problem, as were droughts. So if you wanted to survive, you had to be prepared for anything. If you want to visit the US today, you can travel by car, plane, or boat. You can even take a train from the East Coast to the West Coast. But if you were alive 2 million years ago, this would be impossible. The only way to get around was on foot. Even if you wanted to travel across the ocean, you would have to walk on the bottom because there were no bridges or boats. It would take months to travel around the world, so it was a long and dangerous journey. Not only did people have to walk everywhere, but they also had to watch out for wild animals along the way. There were no cars or houses, so people were constantly at risk of being attacked by predators. Wild dogs, wolves, and bears roamed the land, and there was no way to defend yourself except for a spear or bow and arrow. In fact, spears were invented about 300,000 years before bows and arrows, which means that early humans had to get very close to their prey in order to kill it. This was not only dangerous, but it was also very tiring. Imagine having to run after a wild animal for miles just to get a meal. That's why many early humans carried knives and other weapons with them at all times. They never knew when they would need to defend themselves against a wild animal or another human. Number 3, you can't just build a house anywhere. Building a house is not easy, especially if you don't have any power tools. It takes a lot of planning, effort, and skill to build a house that will last for years. And if you want to build a house today, you have to follow building codes and zoning laws. You also need to make sure that you have the proper permits and insurance. But it wasn't always this way. In fact, it used to be much easier to build a house. This is because there were no rules or regulations about where you could build or how tall your house could be. People were free to build wherever they wanted and whenever they needed to. Of course, this led to some problems. For example, there were often disputes over property lines, and people sometimes built houses too close to each other. This meant that if one person wanted to make an addition to their house, they might have to ask their neighbor for permission. But overall, it was much easier to build a house 2 million years ago than it is today. Number 4, clothing is essential. Humans have always worn clothes, but the type of clothes we wear has changed over time. In the past, people wore clothes made from animal skins and plant fibers. Today, we wear clothes made from synthetic fabrics. But no matter what type of clothes we wear, one thing is for sure: we all need to wear clothes in order to survive. Clothes protect us from the elements and also help us to maintain our body temperature. Without clothes, we would be at risk of hypothermia and other conditions that can be caused by extreme temperatures. But it wasn't always this way. In fact, for most of human history, people didn't wear clothes. It wasn't until about 100,000 years ago that humans started to wear clothing regularly. Before that, humans relied on other methods to protect themselves from the cold, such as huddling together for warmth or starting fires. But as humans evolved and became more sophisticated, they realized that clothes were a necessary item in order to survive in different climates. That's why today we see people wearing clothes all over the world, no matter what the climate is like. Number 5, you better watch your back. Humans have always lived in groups, but the size and composition of these groups has changed over time. In the past, humans lived in small groups of about 20 to 50 people. These groups were made up of related individuals, such as family members and close friends. Today, humans live in much larger groups. In fact, some cities have populations of over 1 million people. But no matter what the size of the group, humans have always had to be careful about who they trust. In the past, there were dangers lurking around every corner, and humans had to be prepared to defend themselves at a moment's notice. This meant that they couldn't trust anyone, not even their closest friends. If someone was willing to betray them once, they could do it again. That's why humans developed a sense of suspicion and wariness towards others. They learned that they could never let their guard down and that they should always be ready for anything. This is one of the reasons why humans are so complex. We have to be careful about who we trust and what we say, because words can hurt and betrayals can be devastating. Now check out this video on the incredible journey of human evolution. What comes to your mind when you think of your ancestors? Maybe it's the Iron Age or medieval times with knights and kings. Perhaps even earlier civilizations like the Egyptians, Greeks, or Romans may spring to mind. But let's think even further back. How about the Stone Age? Most people imagine it as a time of caveman-like figures covered in animal skins, living in caves and surviving by hunting woolly mammoths. But there is so much more to this era. And today we will be discussing some interesting facts about what life was actually like. This is From Stone Tools to Survival, the untold story of our ancestors, starting with the most popular Stone Age tool, stone axes. Axes were extremely useful for a variety of tasks. They could clear trees and undergrowth to create space for planting crops. They could also chop wood for cooking fires or building structures. Axes were not just used for labor-intensive tasks. They could also be used for hunting game or for defending against predators. There are many different types of stone axes, from simple handheld models to more sophisticated ones with long handles. Different cultures developed their own styles of axe heads, but they all served the same basic purpose. Stone axes were an essential part of life during the Stone Age. Without them, people would have struggled to survive in a world full of thick forests and dangerous animals. But wait, don't go thinking these axes were super advanced technology. It took quite a bit of effort to make them. Early humans needed to find a suitable stone, one that was hard and durable enough to withstand repeated blows. They would then use another stone to chip away at the first until it took on the desired shape. This process required patience and skill. In addition, the axes had to be carefully maintained if they were to last for years. This meant sharpening them regularly and making sure they were properly balanced. Overall, stone axes were an important part of life during the Stone Age. Not only did they help people survive, but they were also a symbol of their ingenuity and resourcefulness. Now, we know that sounds impressive, but the truth is the process of creating these stone tools wasn't nearly as complicated as what we do today. In fact, you can do it yourself with just 2 rocks and some practice. So here's how to make a stone axe in 3 easy steps. First, pick out 2 stones. One will be the axe head and the other will be the handle. You want the axe head to be heavier than the handle, but still small enough to grip with your hands. Next, place the axe head on the ground and start hitting it with the handle. Be sure to hold the handle firmly, but don't hit the axe head too hard, or you could break it. Once the axe head has been shaped into an axe, sharpen it by hitting it against a rock. Finally, test out your new axe. It should cut through sticks and small branches easily. Now you're ready to take on the Stone Age. Just kidding. Don't forget to stay tuned because we'll be doing many more videos on this subject. Next up, burial practices. Anthropologists and archaeologists have discovered evidence that early humans practiced a form of burial as early as 2.4 million years ago. This was long before the development of language, art, or religion. What does this tell us? That our ancestors understood the concept of death and that they felt the need to lay their dead to rest. According to Smithsonian Magazine, anthropologists have found that in almost every culture around the world, from the most primitive to the most advanced, there is some sort of ritual associated with death. In many cultures, the body is buried or cremated after death. This is often done to prevent the spread of disease and to show respect for the deceased. However, in some cultures, the body is left exposed or hung from a tree. This is usually done in areas where there is no other way to dispose of a body without contaminating the environment. Regardless of the specific method used, all cultures have some sort of burial custom. Some researchers believe that this custom originated in Africa, while others believe it evolved independently in different parts of the world. Some researchers argue that the custom originated in Africa and spread to other parts of the world as humans migrated out of Africa. Others argue that the custom evolved independently in different parts of the world, as different groups of humans developed their own beliefs and customs. Evidence for both theories exists, so it is difficult to say which one is correct. However, there is general agreement among researchers that the custom of burying the dead is one of the oldest and most widespread customs in human history. Okay, now let's talk about jewelry. We think jewelry is a pretty fun thing to wear, but did you know that our ancestors probably wore it for a variety of reasons? For example, ornaments made from bone, ivory, shell, and stone have been found at archaeological sites dating back thousands of years. These items were likely used as personal adornment or as part of religious or ceremonial costumes. Jewelry may have also been used as a form of social currency, a way to signal one's status or rank within a community. In fact, some scholars believe that the earliest known examples of jewelry, a set of perforated shells found in a South African cave dating back 75,000 years, may have been used as part of a mating display. Male hominins likely chose partners based on the size and quality of their ornaments, with larger, more elaborate ornaments indicating higher status. Whatever the reason, jewelry seems to have been an important part of human culture for thousands of years. If you want to learn more about the subject, check out our video called Crazy Facts About Ancient Egyptian Jewelry. Now let's talk about sex. We know it's a little awkward to discuss our ancestors' love lives, but it's important to remember that they were just people. They had needs and desires just like us. And yes, they had sex. It might not have been as complicated as our modern love lives, but it was still important to them. After all, they were trying to populate the earth. Anthropologists have learned a lot about early human sexuality from studying artifacts like old love letters and sex toys. They've also examined fossilized bones for signs of sexual activity. While it's never possible to know exactly what went on between two people who lived thousands of years ago, it is fascinating to learn what we can about early human sexuality. And finally, the reason why we're talking about this: human beings didn't invent farming. Contrary to what you might have been taught in school, our ancestors were actually foraging for food long before they started farming. Farming is relatively recent development in human history. It only began about 12,000 years ago, yet humans have been around for about 300,000 years. For most of our existence, we were hunter-gatherers, which means we got our food by hunting animals and gathering plants. We lived in small groups and constantly moved from place to place in search of food. Hunter-gatherer societies were able to survive for so long because humans are adaptable creatures. We are able to live in a variety of climates and we are skilled at using tools. However, the hunter-gatherer lifestyle was not without its challenges. There were often conflicts with other groups over resources, and there was always the risk of starvation. Farming eventually became a better way to get food. Farming allowed humans to stay in one place and grow their own food instead of having to hunt and gather it. This led to more reliable food supplies and more leisure time. It also led to the development of villages, towns, and eventually cities. Farming was a major turning point in human history. It allowed us to settle down and build permanent structures. It also led to the development of more complex societies and ultimately our modern world. But despite the benefits of farming, there is something romantic about the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. The idea of being free from the constraints of modern society and living off the land is appealing. In fact, some people still live this way today. There are small groups of hunter-gatherers living in remote parts of the world. They have managed to preserve their traditional way of life and continue to live off the land as their ancestors did for hundreds of years. Let us know what you thought about this video in the comments section below. Subscribe for more videos and like the video if you enjoyed it. Check out our other videos as well and be sure to subscribe. Humans are the only surviving members of the genus Homo, but there were several other species in the genus that lived at the same time. Many of them have very similar brains to ours, and they might have been capable of abstract thought, tool use, and language. But something made them less adaptable than us. So what happened to them? Well, one of the things that kept early humans alive was their ability to adapt to all kinds of different environments. Unfortunately, we don't have much in the way of hard evidence for this, because most organic material like skin breaks down before it has a chance to turn into fossil. But researchers can still make inferences about the lives of early humans by studying the wear patterns on their bones and teeth and the cut marks left on their skeletons from the tools used to butcher animal carcasses. By doing this, researchers think they've learned that Homo erectus had a pretty rough go of it during the Ice Age. Let's take a look at how some early humans braved the elements. Homo erectus lived in Africa between 1.9 million and 117,000 years ago. As such, they were around for two major ice ages during that time. The first one is called the Martian interglacial, which occurred roughly between 800,000 and 600,000 years ago. It got its name because Mars is red, and the climate was really dry, kind of like Mars. During this time, the ice sheets in the northern hemisphere shrank so much that Europe was pretty much ice-free. Some scientists think this may have been the time when Homo erectus migrated out of Africa for the first time. They followed the herds of large mammals across the landscape, eating their meat and gathering wild plants to supplement their diet. But the interglacial only lasted for a couple 100,000 years, and then it was back to business as usual with another ice age. The next major ice age would start roughly 74,000 years ago and last until about 12,000 years ago, sometimes referred to as the last glacial maximum. In terms of temperature, the climate reached its coldest point roughly 20,000 years ago. This second ice age was far more severe than the first. Ice sheets grew over much of northern Europe, and the Earth's average surface temperature dropped by about 5 degrees Celsius. That doesn't sound like a huge change, but remember that temperatures aren't averaged out globally. So in places like northern Europe, the temperature dropped by as much as 15 degrees Celsius. It stayed cold like that for thousands of years. But not everyone was affected equally. Researchers have examined the skeletons of early humans who lived through these ice ages and found that they show signs of stress from malnutrition. One of those is something called cribra orbitalia, which shows up as small pits or bumps on the surface of the bones around the eye sockets. And you may be thinking, well, of course they did. It's obvious that life was hard back then. But no, this isn't just some general effect of living during an ice age. Studies have shown that cribra orbitalia is caused by repeated bouts of severe nutritional stress. In other words, you don't get it from just being hungry once. It means that you went through multiple episodes of severe malnutrition over the course of your life. And if you thought that was bad, there's another condition that's even worse. It's called porotic hyperostosis, and it looks like lesions or patches on the outer surface of the skull. It happens when the body tries to produce new bone faster than it can get nutrients to keep up with it. This can happen if someone is going through puberty or if their diet lacks the necessary nutrients to support healthy bone growth, which seems to be what happened to some of the Homo erectus specimens. Specifically, researchers think that they were lacking protein, which could have been causing them to experience chronic malnutrition. But how did this happen? There are two main ways that this could have happened. The first is that the food supply just didn't have enough protein. But research suggests that this wasn't the case. Sites where Homo erectus lived show that they ate a wide variety of foods, including many high-protein options like shellfish, insects, birds, and mammals. Plus, they also hunted large game, which is generally more nutritious than smaller animals. So it wasn't lack of protein in their diet that was causing these conditions. Instead, it was probably the quality of the food that they were eating. It seems that Homo erectus was suffering from something called the paradox of plenty. Basically, there was too much of a good thing. When people eat meat from older animals that have been living under constant stress, their bodies contain higher levels of a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol affects nearly every organ in the body and raises blood sugar levels, making it difficult for the body to absorb nutrients. It makes sense that older animals would have higher cortisol levels since they've had more time to experience threats. And when the predators started targeting those older animals, it became a vicious cycle. If the prey animals are constantly stressed out and their population is being culled by predators, then the remaining animals will become even less nutritious. Now, if this situation persisted long enough, it could cause problems not only for the predators, but for the prey as well. If a pregnant female is constantly eating low-quality meat, she won't get the right nutrients needed for the baby's development, leading to miscarriages, stillbirths, and infant deaths. That's why researchers think that this might have been the reason why there aren't any fossils of Homo erectus from anywhere in the world that are younger than 117,000 years ago. It wasn't that they couldn't survive the Ice Age, it's that they couldn't survive without older animals to eat. As for how this affected Homo erectus specifically, well, that's not entirely clear, but they weren't the only ones experiencing these effects. Studying ancient animal bones has revealed that other large mammals were also suffering from the paradox of plenty around the same time that Homo erectus disappeared from the fossil record. For example, carnivores like wolves, lions, and tigers all experienced tooth decay because their prey was low in nutrients. Even the woolly mammoth, which looked like it would be a nutritional goldmine, suffered from nutritional deficiencies despite having access to an abundant food source. Their bones showed signs of anemia, meaning that the Ice Age was affecting more than just early humans. So what happened next? Well, the last glacial maximum ended around 12,000 years ago, when the climate started to warm again. This period of time is known as the Holocene, which is the current interglacial. With the return of warmer weather came the return of more nutritious prey animals, and everything seemed to bounce back to normal. Tooth decay and skeletal abnormalities declined. And according to the archaeological record, this was also the time when humans started to develop agriculture. But wait a minute, we're not supposed to be here. So does this mean that Homo sapiens actually went extinct? No, we're definitely still around. But this does suggest that we were only just barely hanging on, and we're not the first hominin to have trouble during an ice age. According to the fossil record, Homo habilis, Paranthropus robustus, and Neanderthals all died out during colder periods in Earth's history. Researchers are still working to figure out what exactly caused each of these extinctions. But in each of these cases, there was likely more than one contributing factor. We know that Neanderthals were driven to extinction at least partly because they lacked the genetic diversity to cope with changing environmental conditions. Homo habilis, on the other hand, went extinct at the same time that the climate was changing from wetter and warmer to drier and colder. And as for Paranthropus robustus, well, that's still an open question. But it's possible that they went extinct because their preferred food sources dried up, or because they were outcompeted for resources by Homo sapiens. In each case, the cold played at least some role in their extinction, but none of them went extinct because the world got too cold. Instead, they were driven to extinction by a combination of changing climates, dwindling resources, disease, and possibly competition with other hominins. As for us, well, we seem to have been lucky so far. Yes, we've gone through several ice ages, and yes, they've affected us pretty badly, but in the end, we've always managed to pull through. Now let's hope that luck continues. Speaking of luck, if you're still watching, you're clearly enjoying this content. And the best way to help us keep making more is to subscribe. By subscribing to our channel, you'll get more fun science videos, and you'll be helping us reach our goal of reaching 1 million subscribers by the end of the year. So what are you waiting for? Click that button and join the community today. Imagine living in a world where life is cheap and death is around every corner. A world where the climate is unstable, natural disasters are commonplace, and danger lurks around every bush. This was the reality for early humans who had to fight tooth and nail for survival. But despite the odds, they not only survived, they thrived. So what tactics did they use to stay alive? Let's find out. Welcome to my channel, and today let's find out about 10 ways early humans survived on the edge. Early humans lived in a world that was vastly different from our own. The climate was constantly changing, natural disasters were common, and there were plenty of dangerous predators to contend with. But despite these challenges, early humans not only survived, they thrived. So what tactics did they use to stay alive? Let's take a look at some of them. Number 10. Fire. Fire is one of the most important discoveries of early humans. It allowed them to cook their food, which made it safer to eat and easier to digest. Cooking also made food taste better, which made it more appealing to early humans who were constantly on the lookout for calories. Fire also provided warmth, which was essential for survival in cold climates. It also helped early humans to protect themselves from predators by providing light and a way to keep warm. In general, fire was an important tool for early humans, and it played a key role in their survival. Number 9. Shelter. Another important thing that early humans used to survive was shelter. Shelter provided protection from the elements and could be as simple as a cave or a rock shelter. In addition to providing protection from the weather, shelter also provided a sense of security and privacy. It allowed early humans to store their food and belongings safely, and it gave them a place to sleep and relax. Creating shelter was a lot of work, but it was worth it. Without shelter, early humans would have been at the mercy of the elements and predators. They wouldn't have been able to store food or belongings, and they would have been constantly on edge. Number 8. Clothing. As the climate changed and the weather became colder, early humans had to find a way to stay warm. They started by making clothing out of animal skins. This wasn't easy, as it required them to kill an animal, skin it, and then sew the pieces together. But it was worth it. Clothing allowed early humans to survive in cold climates, and it also protected them from insects and other pests. It also helped them to carry out tasks more efficiently. For example, they could gather berries without having to worry about thorns, or they could chop wood without having to worry about getting splinters. Overall, clothing was an important adaptation that helped early humans survive in a variety of environments. Number 7. Tools. Early humans used a variety of tools to help them survive. These tools were made out of stone, bone, or wood, and they were used for a variety of tasks, such as hunting, gathering, and processing food. Early humans were constantly coming up with new and innovative ways to use tools. For example, they learned how to make spears for hunting, knives for cutting, and axes for chopping. They also learned how to use tools in combination with each other to make more complex tools. For example, they learned how to use a knife and spear together to hunt large animals. Overall, the development of new and better tools was essential for the survival of early humans. It allowed them to do things that they couldn't do before, and it made existing tasks easier. Number 6. Hunting. Hunting was another important activity for early humans. It was a risky business, but it was worth it because meat is a great source of protein and fat, which are essential nutrients. Early humans hunted a variety of animals, including deer, bison, and wild boar. They also hunted smaller animals, such as rabbits and squirrels. To catch their prey, early humans used a variety of methods. They developed spears, arrows, and other weapons to help them take down large animals. For smaller animals, they simply used their hands and feet. Hunting was a risky business, but it was worth it for the nutritious meat that early humans were able to obtain. Meat is a great source of protein and fat, which are essential nutrients for survival. Early humans were able to survive in a variety of environments thanks to their ability to hunt. Number 5. Gathering. While hunting was an important way for early humans to get food, gathering was just as important. Early humans gathered a variety of plants, including berries, nuts, and fruit. They also gathered edible roots and tubers. Gathering was a more passive way to get food than hunting, but it still required a lot of effort. Early humans had to walk long distances in search of food, and they often had to compete with animals for the best plants. However, gathering was an important way for early humans to get the nutrients they needed to survive. Plants are a great source of carbohydrates, vitamins, and minerals, and early humans were able to survive in a variety of environments thanks to their ability to gather food. 4. Walking. Walking is something that we do every day, and we don't even think about it. But walking is an amazing feat of engineering, and it's one of the reasons that early humans were able to survive. Walking upright on two legs allowed early humans to see over tall grasses and around corners, which gave them an advantage when hunting or gathering food. It also allowed them to travel long distances more quickly, which was important for finding new sources of food and shelter. Walking also freed up their hands, which allowed them to carry more food and belongings. This was important for survival because it meant that they didn't have to make as many trips and they could keep their food and belongings safe from predators. 3. Talking. Talking is something that sets humans apart from other animals, and it's one of the reasons that early humans were able to survive. Talking allowed early humans to communicate with each other and share information about food, danger, and other important topics. This allowed them to coordinate their activities and work together to achieve a common goal. Talking also allowed early humans to pass on knowledge from one generation to the next. This is important for survival because it means that future generations can learn from the mistakes of the past and avoid making the same mistakes. Talking also allowed early humans to form social bonds with each other. This is important for survival because it meant that they had a support system to rely on when times were tough. Number 2. Exploring. Exploring is another important skill that helped early humans survive. As the climate changed and the weather became colder, early humans had to explore new areas in search of food and shelter. They also explored new areas as their population grew, and they needed more resources. Exploration was dangerous, but it was worth it because it allowed early humans to find new sources of food and shelter. It also allowed them to avoid areas that were overcrowded and resource depleted. Exploration also led to the discovery of new technologies and resources. For example, early humans may have discovered new types of plants that could be used for food or medicine. They may have also discovered new materials that could be used to make tools or weapons. Number 1. Adapting. Adapting to new situations is crucial for survival, and early humans were masters of adaptation. They were able to adapt to new environments, new technologies, and new ways of life. This allowed them to survive in a variety of environments and to thrive in spite of the odds. Adaptability also allowed early humans to take advantage of new opportunities. As the climate changed, for example, early humans were able to adapt and start farming. This allowed them to settle in one area and raise crops and livestock. Farming was a huge development in human history, and it allowed early humans to live more sedentary lifestyles. We hope you enjoyed learning about the 10 ways early humans survived on the edge. What are your thoughts on this topic? Feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe for more videos like this. Thanks for watching.